Hey, what's up, YouTube? Red and Bordy here. Today, we are going to break down the Warhammer, one of the, the older or the eldest weapons in New World. Bordy, there's a lot of good changes here. I'm excited to read these with you. This is one of the weapons I hope are really good because it is pretty unique to New World.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. It was fun to use, not quite my cup of tea. So let's go through these changes and maybe that'll change my mind. We'll see.
All right, dude. Well, the first note is most passives across both trees have been updated to be more conditional and unique with fewer passives that provide flat bonuses. They've kind of made a joint effort again across all weapons to do that, to make these trees more interesting and harder to choose from. So here is something, this is a light attack. Your light attack was sped up on the Warhammer's light attack. The second light attack of the Warhammer 2-hit chain has been updated to fit better with the flow of the first attack. Modified the window between the first and second light attacks to make the transitions feel smoother. So that's just a little bit of housekeeping on the basic attack, or the light attack of the Warhammer. Juggernaut Mastery line adjusted to focus more on single target damage. So now you have Crowd Crusher skill tree. Master line is to focus more on crowd control debuffs and dealing damage to multiple enemies at once, or also known as AoE. So here we go, Bordy. Remove Grit from automatically being added to heavy attacks. Grit is now unlocked via a passive upgrade. Bordy, this is, Grit is a big topic across all of these changes. Even previous patch notes in March, they talked a lot about changing Grit and how it worked because of how powerful the mechanic is. So now you'll have to unlock Grit on all your Warhammer attacks.
Yeah, which I think is a lot better because Grit is super powerful. And whenever you just did your heavy attack, you just had Grit on your heavy attack for every time you use the Warhammer, which was pretty strong in the preview event. I did fight a couple of people who were using the Warhammer and they were using those heavy attacks. And it was kind of irritating because Grit is so strong in the game. So I like this change, and it just falls in line with all the other changes they've been making to Grit. And I think it's a good thing to make Grit more of a special thing that you have to spec into versus something you just get for using that weapon.
Agreed. So the next change is remove passes related to only siege, as their functions are too specific for single game mode. Love this change. I don't like the idea of some of your skills being limited to one game mode. So they obviously fixed that oversight there.
Yeah, that is definitely a good change. Although having those passes relating to the siege is pretty cool, but it shouldn't be related to only siege. So, which I think is what they're specifying here, which is really good. Yeah, I would agree. Great change.
Agreed. So here we go. Here they removed the passive that increased Grit damage due to Grit being modified to no longer being interruptible anymore. Now this, obviously that's a big buff in and of itself to have an attack that can't be interrupted. So they removed the damage buff to that. Yeah, which is really good. But again, you have to spec into that passive in order to get the Grit. Benefit from using the Warhammer. So you have to spec into it, and then they remove the passive that increase the Grit damage. So they're just bringing all that in line, which is really good. Because it would suck if you did a ton of damage with the Grit ability and it couldn't be interrupted either. That would be rough. Agreed. Grit is just one of those mechanics, kind of like the stagger with the light attack on the hatchet, that just didn't feel too good, especially when it's it was so common. It just feels like it makes combat, not flow very well, or obviously removes the counterplay of most attack patterns and everything like that. So I think good changes. Removed all upgrades to abilities that added a flat damage increase or AoE size increase. That's a little strange to me, but I can understand why that would be basically one of those linear upgrades that they kind of want to get away from.
Yeah, I don't know. That one's kind of hard to talk on for me. I didn't use the Warhammer a ton, but removing all upgrades to abilities that added a flat damage increase or AoE size increase, that's an interesting one to me, because the Warhammer is all about CC, and there's a lot of AoE abilities on that tree. So I guess maybe it was a little bit too overpowered, they thought. So then they just removed those upgrades. these are kind of hard to talk on because this is all based on the alpha. And so a lot of things have changed previous to the preview event. And now we're moving into changes, and now we're moving into more changes. And so we didn't get to play the previous changes. So it's kind of hard to speak on some of these. And this is one of those that's kind of hard for me to get a handle on right now.
Yeah, you know, and obviously, like you said, a lot of the combat changes that they made prior to this patch are going to change combat entirely. So it's hard to speak, you know, necessarily to put these in a vacuum and say how good or bad they will be with the, you know, the other changes kind of being up in the air at this point, because all the, you know, the attack patterns, the ability to interrupt and stuff like that are completely different now. 2 weapons also changes combat pretty severely. So why don't we hop right in here to the abilities here. Armor Breaker is renamed from Block Breaker. Base ability now penetrates a percentage of a target's armor. Upgrades expand the idea of being unstoppable and weakening enemies. I like this. You know, obviously maces and blunt weapons usually are used to break armor in most games, and it seems to be the case here, Bordy. They're going to try to use the Warhammer in that effort as well.
Yeah, which I think is fine. I like that with maces and blunt weapons. It's fine with me.
So, yeah, so kind of in the same vein, Mighty Gavel is another ability. Animation was updated. Mighty Gavel now uses the old Path of Destiny animation. Removed reactions from Mighty Gavel to keep it from being a CC ability. Made the Justice for All Mighty Gavel Ultimate trigger off a button push instead of automatically, and increase the damage of Mighty Gavel now that is no longer doing any CC. So they changed this skill entirely. Again, you see a step away from CC from the Warhammer, which is odd to me, dude. Like you said, it is a weapon that you think would be kind of littered with stuns and bashes and things like that because of its blunt nature. But they're getting away from that.
Yeah, it is a little bit odd. I don't know why they're removing all of the CC from, or I guess not all of it, but why they're kind of moving away from that a little bit. It is a little odd to me that they are doing that. I kind of liked the fact that it was a CC weapon. It kind of had a lot of utility in that manner. I think it does still have some CC on there, but not quite as much. So that is kind of an interesting change to me. I'm not sure why they're doing that. So before, for those of you who don't know, Mighty Gavel was an overhead leaping attack that crushed down onto enemies with tremendous force. That was the description of it. And they just completely changed Mighty Gavel altogether. They removed reactions from Mighty Gavel to keep it from being a CC ability. That's just, I don't know, man. That's odd.
Yeah, it's
I'm not sure what to make of all the removal of the CC. Increase the damage of Mighty Gavel now that it no longer does any CC. But maybe they felt like there was too much CC on the Warhammer. This is another weapon that I didn't use a ton of during the preview event. I used it very, very little. I just wasn't my cup of tea. It was too slow. So now maybe with the increases in the light attack speed and the animations to make it more smooth to use with your light attacks, maybe I'll try it out or use it during the game whenever it goes live. But just this big, huge hammer is just not really my cup of tea. I like a lot of faster weapons. So a lot of these changes are hard for me, man. I know that's not giving a lot of value to our listeners, but I can't really... I don't know, man. I don't really have a lot to compare this to. Did you use the hammer a ton during the preview event?
No. I, used the musket a lot, but in a vacuum, again, I don't think a lot of these changes are something that we can probably comment on in a whole or as a meta. I just think it's interesting as far as the Warhammer goes, the getting away from CC, which is just odd to me. But at the same time, Bordy, we don't know a lot of the passives in the skill trees. They didn't really reveal those in this, the March update when they reworked all of these. They didn't necessarily reveal every node in the skill tree. So maybe there is some ways to pick up CC on certain abilities as you upgrade these, or maybe as some passives allow you to, stun a person after 2 consecutive ability hits or something like. We don't know. But the thing is I don't think all the information's here, so it is challenging to comment on this. So Wrecking Ball, the animation updated. Wrecking Ball has now used the old Mighty Gavel animation that no longer channels multiple attacks after first hit. Added a flattening reaction and removes siege-related upgrade, of course. Again, so Bordy, this is the old Mighty Gavel animation, I guess. But, not a lot of information here as far as what the ability is meant to do or what is meant to be used for.
What does added a flattening reaction mean?
I guess I don't. I mean, I thought like
What
cartoon
does that even
style,
mean?
like if you flatten your enemy. I don't know.
That'd be kind of funny. I'm not sure that's what that means, but I don't know what that means, man. If somebody knows, please comment below. I don't know what added a flattening reaction means. I have no idea.
No idea either. But I do think generally the reduction of the siege, or like any activity in general in the game, having specific abilities just for those was bad. So I'm glad that they removed all these. Clear out. Here's the next ability. Reduce the knockback distance to allow for more actions to be done to enemies during or while using a crowd control ability on them. Previously, targets hit with clear out would be knocked back so far it was impossible to capitalize on the attack afterward. So here we go. This is a clear out is a CC. Obviously, reduce the distance of knockback, but here's a crowd control ability here, Bordy.
Yeah, this is good, and this is a very good change because it's funny because this is my short time using the hammer. This was an ability that I used, and it did knock them back a really long way. And I remember thinking that, like, man, this ability is good, but it pushes them back so far that I can't follow up with anything else. I remember thinking that exact thing. So this is a really good change. They did need to reduce the knockback distance on that ability for sure, because you couldn't do anything afterwards. They went flying across the map, and they went so far that if you have a melee weapon still equipped, which you would with your hammer, you couldn't follow up. They were able to regain their composure and attack you again before you could capitalize on your CC, which just isn't a very effective CC at that point.
Well, also, other than tanking, there's no real reason to knock someone back with a melee weapon, like unless you're going to run like a hatchet or some ranged weapon to kind of close people, make sure people stay out of your melee range. You can switch over to your hammer real quick and knock them back. But as a, melee character, you tend to want to pull people in instead of knock them back. So I do like that they reduce the damage, which you can knock back. And I can see where there could be some utility for tanks if they want to run a Warhammer on their back bar and use that knockback ability to kind of keep mobs off their healers and squishy people in the group. So who knows? That might be the vision for that skill. Shockwave. Slightly sped up the startup of Shockwave. Remove pushback on Shockwave to make it easier to attack an enemy that has been stunned by the attack. Again, another CC. Sped up the recovery of the Shockwave ability to allow players to be more effectively follow up with a hit after the stun. Stun duration was shortened to account for the equip load modification. So again, you will be able to increase your time that you can CC someone, I believe, with heavy armor and medium armor, I guess. So remove the upgrade that increased the range of Shockwave and made it the ability range the default. So Shockwave got a lot of love here. Obviously, still a stun, and then, like you said, it is going to be affected, and all these abilities, honestly, are going to be affected by what weight of armor you choose to fall under, because you're going to get some added buffs there to your duration of CCs.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you that don't know, Shockwave, you slam the head of the Warhammer into the ground, and it causes an earthquake in a radius around the player, and it previously stunned the victim for 2 seconds, and it left them vulnerable to follow-up attacks. So that's what Shockwave is, and then we just went through the changes on that ability. Just thought it'd be good to have a little bit of context there. I think these are good changes for Shockwave, man. Overall, a buff, I think, for the ability, and I think it's fine. Speeding up the startup of Shockwave is pretty good. It did have a kind of a slow animation before, so I think that's a good change for the hammer. And I think that's kind of an ongoing theme for this weapon, for the Warhammer, is just speeding up some of the animations, because again, playing it in the preview, it was very, very slow, and it should be slow. It's a humongous hammer, but it just felt way too clunky. It didn't feel very smooth using it in the preview, so I'm glad that they're changing some of that stuff for some of the abilities and the light attack in and of itself.
Right. I agree with you, and you just kind of have to be careful when balancing weapons, especially when you have fast attack abilities like rapier and hatchet, and then you have maybe those weapons you can get in 3 or 4 attacks before you can even get in 1. I think you can be a challenge to even make the weapon viable. So they're speeding things up a little bit. Of course, they've reduced or put a limit on the amount of attacks you can do within a chain on any weapon as well. So that will help the Warhammer also as far as viability goes.
Yeah.
So Bordy, also here we have the final ability, which is Path of Destiny. Now, Path of Destiny got an animation update. Path of Destiny now uses the old Wrecking Ball animation, so I guess they're just reusing,
they just switched them.
Yeah, they're switching them all.
Yeah.
Path of Destiny now pushes back directionally based off of the attacker's position. This will prevent enemies from being pushed random directions on hit. Path of Destiny no longer has a full knock back. Now the skill damages does a small pushback and has an upgrade option to whether to stagger the target. Adjusted Path of Destiny area of effect AoE to be able to hit targets closer to the player, and remove the upgrade that increased the area of Path of Destiny and made the upgraded range the default. So, you know, Bordy, obviously sticking true to what they said before, kind of separating these trees out. One is just, you know, more AoE CC centric, and the other one seems to be like you may be able to build out some sort of DPS build here, Bordy, with the other tree in the hammer, which is kind of cool to think about. A two-hander DPS Warhammer build.
Yeah, that would be pretty crazy for sure. I'm not sure that it'll be the most effective thing to do, but maybe it will be. But the Path of Destiny changes kind of fall in line with everything else with the directional based pushes, which is good. They're just trying to make this stuff more consistent, because I think with this ability before, whenever you slam the ground with the Warhammer, it shot out this like linear path, and whenever it hit players or enemies, they just kind of shot out wherever. Well, now it's going to be pushing them back in a directionally based on where you're standing. So I think that's really good, because now you know where they're going to go, so you can follow up, especially in like PvP. Because if you use that ability and it's random and it just pushes them wherever, then you have to kind of turn and adjust on the fly to figure out where they're going to go to follow up. I think that's a pretty good change and a decent buff. It's not huge, and a lot of these changes aren't like huge buffs to the hammer, but I think overall this also has it had the same issue as some of the other ones, and they fixed that too. So it doesn't have like a full knockback, so that you can follow up a lot easier with this ability than you could before. And I think those changes for these CC abilities on the Warhammer are really good, because now you can use them and then follow up with them. And I'm speaking on PvP specifically with the Warhammer. That is very nice to be able to do, especially in like a 1v1 situation, because that was a problem with a hammer. Fighting people with a hammer before, you could fight them, and then it was very, very easy to dodge out of the way of their abilities. They would use one, if you got hit by it, it would hurt, but then you could dodge, you could move before they had a chance to follow up, and you could kill them. It sounds like now they have addressed that issue, and that's very good for the hammer. I think that's kind of a hidden buff here. Not really hidden buff, but I think it's going to be a more significant buff than maybe we realize with those changes for the Warhammer, especially in PvP.
Well, you know, I think generally the Warhammer can be a very strong weapon in both PvE and PvP. Just AoE stuns or CCs in general will be good for these expeditions. When you're running as a tank, you want to be able to stun or, you know, stagger a large group of mobs in order to, obviously, I think there's a lot of new abilities and passives that allow you to do more damage to more damage to mobs that have been CC'd or under the effect of a debuff. So I think the Warhammer is going to be good. It's going to be a good weapon for tanking. It's going to be a good weapon potentially for DPS. And it's going to be a good weapon in PvP. So I'm excited to see how these weapon changes all fit into some sort of meta. I'm excited to see the different builds that we're going to get with all these new changes that we saw in the April update that allow all these different passives and effects that are unique to each ability. So there'll be some Warhammer buffs or Warhammer traits on these weapons that might allow you to manipulate these things in a pretty cool way. Can you imagine like an electricity shockwave or something like that? It's going to be cool, dude. It's going to be cool.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of unique builds, no doubt. And I can't wait for that, dude. It's going to be good stuff.
All right, man. Well, there's the breakdown of the Warhammer. Let us know what the next weapon you'd like to see broken down. We've done probably, close to half of them now, potentially. So let us know in the comments below what weapon you want to see next. Thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate it. Hit the subscription button, the notification bell if you haven't already for more New World content like this, and we'll see you in the next episode.